The session is called Feeding the Future with Canadian Innovation, and we have the pleasure of Peter Dhillon being here with us. Peter wears many hats. He's president and CEO of Richberry Group, which Laura mentioned, chairman of the board of directors of Ocean Spray, member of the board of directors for the Bank of Canada. And in this conversation, we're hoping to get your thoughts, Peter, and it's a big menu we have here of perspectives on the way geopolitics, innovation, climate change require us to think differently about food systems. And in your position as a major food producer and board member of the Bank of Canada, as a farmer, you bring a unique perspective and very diverse perspective on the challenges of bringing innovations to the market. And we're interested in the how. So Evan at the opening talked about wanting to talk about the how of doing this, and we're looking for those insights, specifically on developing how developing a pan-Canadian strategy on agri-food innovation can help us drive the green economy, create jobs, and ensure Canada's position in the world in delivering food to everyone and delivering increasingly carbon neutral food systems. I have a series of questions, and the first re-acknowledges those many hats that you wear. Farmer of a multi-generational family farm, one of the world's biggest cranberry producers, board chair of one of the world's biggest agriculture co-ops, Ocean Spray. You chaired the BC Premier's Task Force on Food Security, made recommendations pertaining to ag tech and innovation specifically. Board of Directors of Bank of Canada gives you specific insights. All of those aspects, maybe could you tell us a little bit about your journey and what it's taught you about food systems?
Sure. First of all, thank you everyone for showing up today, and special thanks to the Arrell Institution for doing this, and to Evan who's been a kind friend of mine, and for organizing this, and for all the people that are behind the scenes that we never really pay enough attention to that put this together. So huge thank you to everybody. Yeah, so let me begin telling you a little bit about my story. You know, I'm, as you just heard, I'm a farmer. That's where I began. That's where my roots are, no pun intended. But that's how I started working with my parents. And over the decades, you know, one of the things about farmers is we don't like to change. We like to keep things the way they are. Until we run into a lot of the issues that we've just seen evolve over the last few years. You know, you had the war, you had supply chain issues, and everyone was focused on, you know, how that had an impact on agriculture. And as a farmer, I've seen over the past few decades how the weather system has completely changed. And what we could do 10, 20 years ago, we can't do today. And as a farmer, I've realized we can't continue doing the things the same way we've been doing it for decades, and that requires a lot of change. And so that's how I started from my hat as a farmer. But then my hat as the chairman of this global food CPG company, a food and beverage company, I started to see that not just our system was starting to retract, but talking to other food companies, global food companies, everyone was starting to see the same thing that we did. And that was the reduction of food. That we started seeing on this continent, food production dropping. In fact, I think if you watched the news, you'd see even in Europe. Europe is on fire. And a lot of the food there started to dry up on the plants just because of the heat. And now we look at California. About in the end of this decade, about 1 million acres are going to come out of production because the lack of water. So this is leading to something that I don't think we're giving enough attention to. And it's kind of my call out to wake up to everybody, because if you look around, you saw India shut its borders on rice exports, and India is the largest producer of rice. And they're saying, we've got to feed our own people. You know, you have Thailand and Vietnam who are talking about doing the same thing. California, their state government is talking about eventually implementing rules and laws around exporting of food. this should be like a wake-up call to everybody. I'm as a farmer, I'm seeing it on my crops. As a chairman, I see it in a global system where there is a decline of food. I've seen where competitors and food companies are starting to say, we need to come together. This isn't your problem. This isn't my problem. This is our problem. And we need to start solving it. And so from the geopolitical side of it, how come government hasn't woken up to the fact that I think we're heading to a food crisis? Because it's really simple. It really is. Food production is dropping, yet population is growing. And, that kind of leads, if we don't start doing things differently, if we don't start being creative, if we don't start innovating, we're heading down a huge problem. Just imagine 10 years ago, if we started talking about housing, and do we have efficient housing to, supply Canadians in the future? But we're solving for it in the moment. We're not if we had some of this evidence before, we had thought about it and been innovative, we could have hopefully avoided a lot of the housing problem. I'll tell you the difference is, if we wait to solve the food crisis in the moment, it's going to be a lot uglier. Believe me, a lot uglier than a housing crisis. So my push and my call to action is, don't listen to me. Just look around you. Everything is burning on this planet, and food is as well. And we need to start thinking differently. We need to start innovating. We need to protect the conventional system as much as we can, but we really need to start taking action, and we need to start calling out our leaders and saying, you need to start thinking about this, and don't bring it to us when we're in the moment. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your question.
That's perfect. I mean, you're setting this up very well and making it very clear that you see a crisis, not only a crisis emerging, but a crisis now. And as you say, acting now is vital. As a follow-on to that, we often hear people talk colloquially about food systems, but we don't always in that hear an acknowledgement of the scale required. So scale is important. Nor do we necessarily hear an acknowledgement of the fact that by and large the food system exists in the private sector. It's in Canada, tens of thousands of companies, globally hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of companies that are the food system. Why is scale and the fact that it exists in the private sector, why is that important, and how does that play into the crisis?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're fortunate as Canadians, let's be honest. We go to our grocery shelves and they're full. And so we don't really pay enough attention to the food system. Like, what does it take to keep those shelves full all the time? We're very, very fortunate in this country. I mean, we saw a little bit during the pandemic when the shelves started going a bit empty and everybody got excited and worried. But there is so much that has to occur to continue to keep our shelves full. Go around the rest of the world where, those shelves are at best half full. And I don't think we pay enough attention as Canadians what it takes to put a food system in a way to continue to bring a consistently steady supply of food to those shelves. I run into people who think that a food system is what are those things on the weekends called? Farmers markets? Right, yeah. That's how you buy your food and that's how we should get it. You need scale, you need these big companies to continue to feed the population. And I think we are so complacent because we have you go to your store, you see your shelves are always full. And so we don't think about it. I don't think it's not front and center. It only becomes front and center when those shelves start going empty. And that's something to take back and think about, is what happens when those shelves start going empty. And I'll tell you, wow, you got a little bit of a push when we went into the pandemic, and it could come from reduction in food imports. It can come from geopolitical issues. If the United States decided it wants to shut down the border, as Canada, where almost half of our year is in winter, we rely on others to provide our food. And so then you ask yourself a really important question: what does sovereignty mean? In my interpretation of sovereignty, it's about having food security. And then what is food security? And a lot of people think that food security begins and ends at the farm, but it really doesn't. It does begin at the farm, and we can identify what a farm is. But in my mind, it ends at the shelf. And everything that's broken in between the farm and the shelf needs to be fixed, because we need to get food in a reliable pace to those shelves so we can feed Canadians. And I don't think we spend enough time, and when you talk about scale and process and manufacturing and what it takes, we don't understand all the complexities between the farm and shelf. And those are the areas where we need to build more resilience. For sure, we need to be more resilient. And frankly, we've seen food inflation happen over the past year or two, and all of those costs in there are starting to accelerate. And I'll maybe say something that's not popular, but as Canada, we don't spend enough time figuring out that in between. What do we need to fix that in between? And that, frankly, it's not just about farm and growing. It's about the process to getting it to the shelf. And we are not anywhere close to being where we need to be. And quite frankly, it pisses me off when we have to drive food a couple of thousand miles away to get processed, and then we bring it back. We should be doing it here. Sorry about the language, I apologize. I just got in from Europe, so I'm tired.
So in that vein, in your work at various levels, corporate, government, your insights, you've often said that innovation is part of the solution. Can you tell us more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if we agree, and I think the evidence is showing that conventional food production is on a decline. And the culprit is, no longer the war, no longer supply chain, it's climate change. The weather patterns that this globe is facing today that we've never faced before, and the impact is on food production is, in my experience, I've never seen the whipsawing of weather. So let's just take that. So how do you build a resilient food system? Obviously, you've got to support the conventional system. You've got to be innovative, and you've got to figure out, how can we get as much production, maximize production around the world. Look at the prairies. In Saskatchewan, a 4-year drought. This year in Alberta, in BC, didn't have enough feed to feed their animals. So they went to auction. So when you look at, the system is starting to fail, how can you be a bit more innovative? But also, how can you use technology? Where can technology today, other than the conventional, where else can it lead us to? And, there is a new emerging area on indoor growing that is happening. Now, if you go to the Netherlands, they figured it out a long time ago. And they're, such a small country is now the second largest producer of food in the world, exporter of food in the world. And here's this little country that's figured it out. We need to do the same, especially being in Canada, especially having 6 months of winter all the time. How can indoor agriculture play a much bigger role? And, like every other innovation startup, it's going to fail. It's not going to be perfect at the beginning, but it's actually something that we're going to have to really lean into, because it will be a big part of the food system going forward. As we have population increases, when you look at food security, you look at feeding the world, 8 billion, 7 to 8, 8 to 9 is going to go faster than it did from 7 to 8. And, as much as people would like to say, well, we've got to export, which we do, but we need to make other countries more food secure by having these technologies, being able to figure it out. Yeah, we're going to fail, and it's going to cost money. but I don't think there's much of a choice. We need to start bringing food systems to areas around the world where they can be a little bit more efficient on growing food. We also, at Canada, we need to do the same thing as well. You know, we have an opportunity up in the north where we have a lot of indigenous populations. Just imagine creating some of these food systems where they can be a little bit more, you know, self-efficient on food supply. So it is a system. Money is going there. Capital is going there already and trying to figure it out. Yeah, there's more losses than wins, but it's a system that's going to eventually have to win for everyone. And smart money, patient money is already saying that. And I'm glad that they're starting to invest. Now we just got to, and I'm sorry if people are here from government, I don't mean this in a wrong way, but we need you as our partner to come along as well with us. We need you to say, hey, listen, how do we become a part of the solution and not part of the problem? And so my call out is, you know, sometimes it's a simple solution as, you know, just get out of the way. Start taking down those barriers. You know, I think I was talking to Lenore Newman, and, you know, we just came back from this trip and said, you know, we have rules that have been put in 20 years ago around 100 milliliters. You can't come on, you got to go through security, 100 milliliters. Well, that was 20 years ago, and they had the reasons for 20 years ago, but nobody's thought about it. Hey, let's make passenger life a little bit better. Do we really need to have these rules? You actually don't, to be quite honest with you. Same thing with here, is how can government start thinking about solving this problem with us? And, you know, a lot of the solutions are just, you know, regulatory. Don't get in the way. Sorry if I've...
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to unpack that a little bit more, maybe in two respects. One on the plus side, why should or could Canada be a leader in terms of the innovation you talk about, these goals of food production, being a leader in the world in terms of food production, which we are, but maybe not to the same extent as Netherlands, for example. So why should and could this happen in Canada? And maybe I'll start with that, and then we'll come to the negative side. What are, you know, I'll ask you about those barriers, and I have some categories. But maybe on the positive side, why should or could this happen in Canada?
Well, I mean, I think we're one of the first countries that are actually starting to talk about this. I know there are a few countries that are further ahead, but I mean, Guelph has been, you guys have been doing this for some time. University of the Fraser Valley, they're talking about it. I mean, there's conversations that are happening today that need to, you know, move a little bit faster. And so why Canada? Well, because, you know, we're a country actually that needs to rely on some of this technology more than others. We have a lot of great companies. We have great farmers here who want to continue to grow food. So I think there's just so much opportunity that we have available to us. And, you know, we are an innovative country as well. And I think this is perhaps, and Canadian technology, quite frankly, is very trusted. You can take it around the world, and people would love to see us succeed because then they know it's been tried and tested.
So now on the challenges side or the barrier side, I've got three categories. I'm going to start with research and development. What do you think are some of the barriers with respect to research and development in terms of innovations that will lead to the kind of progress we need to make?
Yeah, funding, capital. It's and you know, patience. You know, this is not a quick win. This is a must win, but it's not a quick win. And the must win is we need to figure it out before we start running out of food. And you know, I think that patient capital is very important. But, you know, if you don't look at this on a quarterly basis, did we make money or did we not? I think you're going to need to start off by saying, okay, this is going to take time. But there's going to be a social win. There's going to be a commercial win. There's just going to be a national win if we get this thing right.
The next category is investment and capital.
I just answered that.
Yeah, so barriers there. But beyond research and development, are there other barriers in terms of investment and capital?
Yeah, I mean, you know, kind of going back to what I said earlier, business is ready to invest. It just needs certainty and speed. And I think this is where government can come in and play a role in being a partner. Because if you want this capital, the capital will come because it understands the problem. And it understands it needs to innovate behind technology. But they need to know that if they're going to do this, that they're not going to run into a political system that's going to slow them down. So they need speed and they need certainty that, nobody's going to get in the way. And I think after that, it starts going.
So that feeds right into the last category, which is policy and regulatory barriers. And I know you have some insights in that regard, and maybe even some examples, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, okay, so, yeah.
As much as you feel comfortable divulging.
Sure, thank you. It goes back to, we have policy, we have regulations that's been there for a long time. And nobody wants to kind of blow the dust off the books and say, okay, do we need to do things a little bit differently? And we do, because what worked for us back then isn't going to work for us going forward. In fact, I would even argue it's not working for us today. And, what kind of got us here is not going to get us there. You heard that expression many times, but it's actually true. Some of our policies, some of our regulations, they're actually slowing us down and getting in the way. And, we need to, if we start taking the approach of what are we trying to solve, and then does those policies and regulations, do they work on the problem that we're trying to solve? If we start there, we can actually get a lot further, a lot faster. But we have to have committed people to say, all right, what's the problem and how are we going to solve it?
Do we have the right platforms? And I know that question came up earlier. Do we have the right platforms? This is a platform for learning about, talking about, listening in terms of these issues. I mean, do we have the right mechanisms for organizations to understand what's going on, for governments to understand what's going on to spark the innovation that's needed? I mean, do those platforms exist?
I think so. Like you said, we're here today. Here's a platform that exists. Here are a few other platforms that. It's just really, listening, understanding. Like, I've lived in an industry that never got attention. Because other things were more important, whether it was the auto sector or the housing sector. They just never got enough attention. The platforms are here. And to me, feeding people, feeding Canada should be on top of mind in every Canadian conversation. I will tell you, I was at a food conference of big food companies, and we had the Secretary of Agriculture speaking to us. And it was the first time I heard a politician say this. And the politician who was the Secretary of Agriculture in the Biden administration said, today, food security is as important as national security. And they started getting it. So the platforms are here. We just got to get Canadians, our governments, to start getting it as well.
Shifting back to the private, how does the current macroeconomic situation, higher interest rates, for example, make new approaches or the approaches you're talking about different or more challenging, less challenging? How does that affect things?
I got to go to a board of directors meeting for the Bank of Canada after this heading there. And so you asked me a question, how's this?
What's happening with interest rates?
I mean, listen, it's making it harder, for sure. Like, listen, Canadian farmers investing in innovation, if you have to borrow the capital, it makes it tough. And I know farmers who have innovated and borrowed money and are having some challenging times today, and hopefully there'll be a day in the not too distant future where we see those interest rates starting to come back down again. But it is tough, and many sectors are going through the same thing. But I think that at the end of the day, if we give it enough attention and time and certainty and speed, there's a lot of capital on the sideline that's not debt that says we want to come in and we want to invest. We just need to create a place for that investment to come. We're a great country. We should be making sure that that capital wants to come to Canada and nowhere else. But unfortunately, the capital is going somewhere else today.
What about business models? I mean, you chair a large co-op. Is that part of the solution? Different business models. Are there examples in the agriculture and food sector that are different from other sectors, or are there ways that the agriculture and food sector maybe isn't adopting different business models than other sectors maybe, or should there be a rejuvenation of co-ops, for example?
Yeah, interesting question, and I don't know whether one model is better than the other. I think today farming faces a huge problem, and that problem is succession. Do your kids want to do what you did? And many children today don't want to do what their parents did. I was in 2018 in New York City at a ag tech conference made up of 300, young people, my age. Everybody was young, but they were all young people. And I asked them, I go, what do you guys do? And so, we're farmers. So you're farmers. Where are your farms? That rooftop in Manhattan or this box in Queens? We grow food. And they were so excited. It was such a moving moment for me, because when I walked out of it, I don't know if I'm going to answer your modeling question, but when I walked out, it hit me that today, this generation, it's not that they don't want to grow food, they just want to do it differently. We see our food system, a farm, as a field and a tractor and a farmer. And some of the young people are saying, no, it's in a contained environment, wearing lab coats, doing things a little differently, but producing food in a city where the people are. And it was such a aha moment for me. I was like, yeah, this is where the food system is going. So around modeling, I think the way we are today, whether it's a co-op model or not, we're facing a lot of challenges, and one of the challenges is around succession.
That it's interesting because so I work in a university. When companies are approaching us, increasingly, almost exclusively, want to talk about pipeline, and you just told us about experiences with young people who are very excited about the sector. But we find that that's generally a challenge, and I don't know if what's your experience in terms of finding the people you need to drive your business, for example, in this sector?
It's so difficult. It is. I will tell you, if we didn't have foreign labor program, we wouldn't be having a lot of our farms. It's just that simple. It's not about Canadians and giving Canadian jobs away. Canadians just don't want to work on the farm. If we didn't have this system, even kind of going back to Guelph, I don't, even my upper management, I can't find people to fill in and recruit there. It's just become so much tougher to retain people, to recruit people in the conventional agricultural way. So for me, I think because I love to grow food, how can I continue to grow food knowing that I got to do it differently? And it's really about, I think, the tech, the innovation, moving from outdoor to indoor, and where those opportunities are going to lead in the future. But at the end of the day, I think it's the right thing to do, because what I love about indoor growing is you can do it in the city. and you could have fresh food to consumers in the day. You harvest it, and there you go. It's there. And it's nutritionally as good as the conventional way. In fact, some would argue even better.
Well, I think part of that pipeline solution is if we could have more people hear you. So that this platform is important because you represent a much more sophisticated agriculture and food sector than many notions would have us believe. And I really appreciate that we're capturing this, because that can be part of our recruitment strategy. I think we're running a little to the end of our time here, but I want one more question, if that's okay.
Yeah, the clock says you're about a minute over time.
Oh, am I? Oh, well, we'll just ignore that. One very quick question then. The last time we had a chance to talk about things kind of generally was 2019. We were with Evan, we were in a pub in Ottawa. I mean, you were as excited back then and as optimistic back then about the sector. What has happened since 2019, if you reflect back, that has been progress?
Yeah, well, I think we're starting to see some of the technology that we were just talking about starting to emerge, starting to happen. Indoor farming is starting, and it's actually, there are a number of cases where it's actually been successful and very profitable, and they're doing, and I think some are right here in your province, right? I think even there's a realization on the conventional side of it. We need to start innovating. We're going to use drones. We're going to, do things a little differently. So the call to action is taking place, but it needs to be louder, and we need to start moving way faster than we are right now.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Peter, for your time.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.